have walked back your commentary. I give you credit for that, because there are people on the right who will say things that incite violence. They will slander and defame disenfranchised groups of people. And when they do incite violence, and you do have shootings like the one that just happened in El Paso, Texas, that was motivated by an anti-immigrant, agenda, well, they won't take responsibility. I do give you credit because you have walked back your comments. But I don't go around calling every Republican white power Barbie. I don't think that every Republican is a bad person. But I do think that as public figures, as people who have individuals who see us as an inspiration, we have an obligation to make sure that our language is careful, it's measured, and I've messed up. I want to take responsibility for the times that I've messed up. But I just think that you mischaracterize groups of people in a way that's unacceptable, and it directs more violence and more hatred toward them. You get more upset about unarmed black people getting shot and killed by cops than you do about the actual victims. You support the cops, but why not support 12-year-olds like Tia Rice?
I will always support our law enforcement. I've given you a very long time to talk. A couple of things that you said that I want to clear up. When I said I walked back my comments that were made, I never said we need guns so that we can defend ourselves against migrants coming across the border. I said we need guns because if you're refusing to protect and defend this nation with our borders, we as the American people have to have a means to protect ourselves because the government is not going to do it for us. And yes, I believe that's vigilante
justice. That's vigilante justice. That is
outlawed. Vigilante justice. That's the Second Amendment.
Let's talk a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about immigration.
Right.
Let's talk about that immigration thing, though. I mean, I don't want to. We'll get to Second Amendment. Trust me. But I want to talk about that because you have mentioned that you want to defend the Second Amendment in part because you believe we should be able to defend ourselves against immigrants coming to the country.
Against anything that threatens to harm us. That's what the Second Amendment is for. Against our government.
Let's talk about the immigration part of it.
Against anything.
Is there a specific
threat? That's a huge threat in America.
Is there a specific
anything?
Is there a specific threat from coming from the southern border that you believe requires Americans to take arms and go to the border with them to defend the country?
I don't know if either of you have. I've been to the border several times. I've been with our ICE agents. I've spent a considerable amount of time with both groups. When they say we don't know who's coming across our border, and we see people from 78 nations in the last couple of months that have come over here, and we have a porous border, I'm not saying defend yourself because immigrants are bad. I'm saying when we don't know who's coming across our border, that is a threat to our national security. And so Democrats want to turn that into, it's anti-migrant, you don't like brown people. No. I don't like anyone coming to my country. I don't know who they are. And when you have an unenforced border, that is what happens.
Right. So I'm not going to sit here and accuse you of being racist because you want a secure border. But let's talk about whether or not. Because why are we not able to have an immigration policy? I would argue that part of that comes from the fact that both sides are coming at each other so hard and perhaps not listening too much. Let's talk specifically about how to fix the immigration problem. You recognize there's a problem. I can't put words in your mouth, but I think most of us recognize that immigration isn't quite working in this country the way that it should. What is the solution in your mind, Tomi? Like, how do you, not just what are the problems, but how do we fix them?
Well, the first solution is to build a wall. And it's not because I'm a Trumpian. It's not because Donald Trump said it and I believe it. It's because I've spent time with the men and women of Border Patrol, and when the people that are out there on the front lines day in and day out say, if we had a physical barrier, our jobs would be much easier. We could dedicate resources other places. We need a physical barrier. And then for the Democrats to say, no, it's a manufactured crisis. The Border Patrol agents that do this for a living, they don't really know what they're talking about. Walls, we don't need walls. That's not going to solve the problem. You're completely dismissing people that do this for a living. These people are Republicans, these people are Democrats, these people, some don't care about politics, 50% Hispanic, Latino, who are serving in Border Patrol, and they say, we need a barrier, we need a wall. Every single one of them I talk to. So to say that doesn't work, you're saying these people don't know what the hell they're talking about.
So I think solutions are incredibly important, and I think that the left has been mischaracterized. This whole notion of open borders is not something that's, a widespread idea that's accepted by people on the left. But I will say that part of the problem is that we always focus on what we can do, what kind of Band-Aid we can use to solve a giant gushing wound. And so yes, there has been a migrant crisis, but we never ask, what caused this migrant crisis? Why is there so much crime, in the Northern Triangle? And we have to take responsibility as Americans for our actions abroad. So let me be specific. There are multiple actions we can take to root out crime in countries like Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. For instance, over 200,000 guns from the United States travel south of the border into these Central American countries, which leads to crime. These cartels, these gang members use these guns, which by the way are purchased legally in the United States at gun shows and things like that. It helps them carry out the violence that's making these migrants flee. So we have to ask ourselves, yes, we have the Second Amendment, yes, we should protect it, but what can we do to stop the flow of US guns into Central American countries? One other thing, our drug war has also fueled violence in these countries. So it's not enough to say, we're just gonna build a wall and be done with it. No, unfortunately, it's not gonna work.
You gotta
It's
stop
not
the
enough
hemorrhaging.
because the majority of undocumented immigrants came here by flying in.
Let me ask this, and Tomi and I have worked together before. She knows I am progressive, but I do my best to be fair, so I'll admit my bias here. Is there an argument that, I know that as liberals, as progressives, myself included, we often say that this wall would be a horrible message to send to our southern neighbors. It would send a message that amounted to discrimination based on race.
I mean, that ship has sailed.
But if we try to extract that, let me just ask for devil's advocate's purpose. Is there not a world in where both the problems that you're talking about and the problems you're talking about could not be addressed at the same time? Is it worth it for Democrats to continue to oppose the wall specifically based on that? It almost sounds as if though a wall might be a Band-Aid, arguably, but a Band-Aid in place while these other issues are addressed. Is it worth it for Democrats to continue to fight against the wall specifically, or could it be a part of a larger solution?
Well, I think that Democrats and their messaging on the wall has been a failure. And the reason why I say that is because they are not doing a good job discussing the complexity of immigration and why there's a flow of migrants. Instead, they're focusing on the discrimination angle, they're focusing on the bigotry angle, and I get that. That's what gets the most attention. But in reality, they do need to talk about the complexities at hand, and that means talking about gun regulation. That means putting themselves out there to discuss solutions for very controversial issues that are related to immigration. I don't think that they want to do that.
I agree with you on that, but I also want to address, you keep going back to the Second Amendment, and I want to make sure I understand you correctly, because what it sounds like to me, and I'm sure to a lot of conservatives that are listening, is that we should infringe upon my Second Amendment rights so that they don't go to other countries south of our border, and then that makes them come to our country illegally. I'm not going to give up my Second Amendment rights because we've got illegal immigrants that are trampling over our borders. So it's not the solution that
I hear what you're
Americans
saying. I hear what you're saying. So I think that it's really important to understand that every constitutional right that we have has its limitations. I am supportive of the Second Amendment. However, there are certain loopholes that are helping to send these guns to Central America. So for instance, there was a wonderful piece recently written in The New Yorker that talked about a Floridian, a gentleman named Mr. Crumpler, I forget his first name, but he was buying a giant amount of guns at these gun shows, right? So you can go to a gun show, there's really no regulation, you can purchase as many guns as you want, and he was selling it to individuals from Honduras. And then he started realizing, they keep wanting AR-15s, they want specific types of guns, who are these people, what are they doing with the guns? And finally, he ended up working with the feds because he realized he was helping fuel the violence in these countries where all these migrants are fleeing. And so it's a very simple issue. Just close the gun show loophole. That doesn't infringe on your rights.
But you realize that if you buy your gun from a firearms dealer, you still have to go through the background check. You realize that, right? That
I do, but I'm not talking about buying it from a dealer. And even in the case of buying your gun at a dealer where you do a background check, there are loopholes to that process as well. So one of the ways that Dylan Roof was able to purchase a gun was, the FBI literally has 3 days to do the background check. He went right before a 3-day weekend, right? There was a federal holiday. And so the FBI didn't get back to the private seller in time. And at that point, the private seller, without doing a background check, or having the FBI doing the background check, could just sell the gun, right? So that's the reason why I'm saying you can still have access to your Second Amendment rights, to your guns, but there are certain laws that just make sense, certain loopholes that we should cut or get rid of in order to ensure that guns don't end up in the wrong hands.
And we can have those conversations. But when you have people like candidates from your party saying we're going to confiscate your guns, we're going to send the police to knock on your door and confiscate your guns, that's problematic. But before we get into the full Second Amendment thing, I do want to go back to immigration, because you talked about some of the problems and how we're not addressing the problems and we're not providing solutions. I think the wall is a solution. I don't think that's the only solution. We need to change our asylum laws so that people that are actually seeking asylum are able to see those judges in a timely manner, and they're not right now because anybody is coming across the border, which, by the way, you're not claiming asylum if you come to this country illegally and then raise your hands and say, I'm claiming asylum. You claim asylum at a port of entry. That's not the case.
So what do we do when Border Patrol agents are literally blocking ports of entry to prevent them from coming in? What do we do? Because that's not it. Trump has gone out of his way to do away with legal means to claim asylum. Look, I don't know what your family values are, but my family values are, if my family is in jeopardy, if their lives are at risk, I will do anything and everything to get them to safety.
Let's let Tomi have a chance to respond to that.
I'd like to be able to finish my full thought here. Okay, so you got asylum laws, and the people that are actually seeking asylum that have credible fear, they get to have their time in front of a judge. And it turns out, as per Border Patrol, most of those asylum claims are fraudulent, or they are not a credible fear. They're deemed really invalid. And by that time, though, because our immigration because we've been invaded to the extent that we have, with 100,000 people coming over in a month, thank goodness our president and DHS has been able to drop that number, thank goodness, to about 50,000, still too many. But they wait 2 to 5 years to go to their court date. By that time, they have already escaped into the shadows of this nation. They've already had children. They are now essentially living in the shadows as an illegal immigrant. That is a problem. People that are actually have credible fear, they are pushed to the back of the line. And when you say that our president is closing port of entry, I went to San Diego into that San Ysidro port.
No, but your anecdotal
evidence
means
you
nothing.
need to let me talk.
What means
if you let me talk, I can give you more than
let me actually talk for a second. Hold on, let me talk for 1 second, because I asked you.
I want to finish my thought on the border.
I'm going to ask you a question that'll allow you to finish it. I'm going to allow you to finish it, but let me ask you it this way. Because
I want to finish my point in San Ysidro.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll let you finish your point on San Ysidro, but then I want you to answer.
I
want you to answer the question that will give you an opportunity to do it. Because my point that I made, the same question I asked her, which was, could a wall not be a solution to the Band-Aid, and then all of the other issues also be addressed at the same time? I want to give you a chance to answer about San Ysidro and talk about ports of entry, but I want to ask you if it's not possible to be making, is the Trump administration or people on the Republican side losing the ability to win their argument because they won't accept that some of the issues that the left feels need to be addressed. You feel the ports of entry need to be addressed. If she would agree to that, would then you agree that we need to worry about crime in Honduras and El Salvador?
I would like to discuss that. First of all, I want to talk about San Ysidro because what I'm saying is not anecdotal evidence. That port was closed for 5 hours because migrants during the invasion rushed it and they had to close it because it was
that was the reaction after it was closed.
But
Trump closed it, and that's how they reacted.
5 hours, Border Patrol had to close it. I've been there. I stood there where these wonderful people were throwing rocks at our Border Patrol agents, and then they were all physically ramming a fence to knock it down. And then they stormed the port. And then it had to be closed for 5 hours, costing both sides a great deal economically. So I've been there. It's not anecdotal evidence. I've been there, and I've seen it. I've seen the rocks that were hurled at our Border Patrol agents, too, by these lovely immigrants looking for a better life. I've seen it firsthand. Also, if we're going to address problems in the country, we can address that because there are a lot of problems in these countries. And Matt Lenin spent a lot of time in those countries, which is a reason why you're seeing the border crossings going down, because he did spend time in those nations. That was our outgoing secretary, did spend time there. You're also seeing Mexico, because of this president, cooperating and also saying, you're right, we need to put our troops on the border, we need to help you with your problem. That was also because President Trump decided to crack down. But we're talking about crimes in these countries. How do you think these criminal organizations are largely funded? Beyond drugs, they're also funded by smuggling. So you're having immigrants who might be coming over here looking for a better life, paying a coyote or a smuggler thousands of dollars to come into the United States illegally. That is funding the criminal organizations that are ruining those countries. So if we're saying
smugglers are different from cartels and gangs. So the cartels and gangs are the individuals that are carrying out acts of violence that's so brutal that these, and by the way, the mischaracterizations that you're guilty of right now is why people call you racist. I'm just telling you.
Because
right?
I was there?
Yeah, because you're dehumanizing.
I'm not.
Dehumanizing individuals who are fleeing crime in their countries.
Why are they
Let
throwing
me
rocks
ask-
at our border patrol agents, Anna? That
Are
is
you
my
going to
question.
Let me
now?
ask- let me ask-
Let me finish.
let me
Because
ask-
I've been very
You have.
calm considering the situation.
You have.
While you interrupted me,
But let me ask this.
calm, like you trampled
Would
over
it
all
be-
of my time.
Would it be accurate to say that when Anna meets someone or speaks to someone who is a Trump supporter and that Trump supporter happens to espouse or display racist views, that Trump supporter that she's speaking to in that moment is not necessarily themselves a good representative of all Republicans? Would that be accurate?
Sure.
If someone, okay, so is it possible that your experience in San Ysidro at that one port of entry on that one day
The biggest
might
one
not be
on
an
Earth.
example of how all ports of entry are on
I'm
all
talking
day?
about when it had to be closed, because she was
I understand what you're talking
referencing
about.
a
It did.
specific
What
time.
you're saying is not inaccurate. It's true. It did. But is it fair to say that that is an example of what is happening at all ports of entry all of the time, or did it happen on the day that you were there?
It happened during the
The day that you were there.
caravan.
It happened
during
it
the
happened
but she
when
was
you were
referring
there.
to a
So
specific
that would be
incident.
anecdotal, because that's an example of exactly something that happened while you were there, right?
But when she was referring to a specific incident, have you been to the border? Have you spent any time with our border patrol agents?
Listen.
No, that's
I've lived in Los Angeles my entire life. I just want to make a quick note about something. For all the fear mongering that happens about immigrants and they're so dangerous and they're criminals and we need to look out, you're from South Dakota, which has a relatively small immigrant population. And you made a decision to move to Los Angeles where 35% of the population consists of immigrants. Do you feel unsafe? Do you?
I feel unsafe with the
Because
border.
I grew up with these individuals, and these individuals have actually improved my life. They have given me a worldview that I wish you had. Because they enrich this country in ways that I
want to ask you a question.
To blow them off as dangerous criminals constantly.
I'm not blowing up all off, Anna. What I'm saying is there's a difference between an immigrant and an illegal immigrant, number one.
And one
there's
other
a
thing
difference,
let me
number
finish
one.
my point, because I just want to make one
No,
more
because
point, and then you can
you're
go on,
saying
and then I can go on. I
demonizing.
need to make one more point, and you can finally go on another filibuster. Listen, one of the other issues is, look, the wall, we have diverted money from the military, we've diverted money from disaster relief funds in order to build the wall. Okay, fine, build the wall. But here's the thing, it's not really going to protect our border. I mean, if you look at nonpartisan studies on it, it indicates that it's going to do nothing. It's a giant waste of taxpayer money. When we're dealing with no health care, we're dealing with situations where people are becoming homeless because they can't afford housing, so we're going to divert all of our resources to that. Okay, fine. But then what do we do about the vast majority of migrants who come in by flying in, right? What do we do about that? Are you scared of them too?
Let's let you answer all of that, and then I
Don't.
want to use it, and then I want to not come back to immigration and switch a little bit. But you finish and respond.
Illegal immigration is a threat, and all of the things that your wonderful Democratic Party wants to provide to people free of charge is not going to be possible if you have an open border.
They pay a lot in taxes. A lot. They pay $13 billion a year in Social Security taxes that they never get to take advantage of. They pay a ton of money in sales tax, a ton of money in state tax. They even pay income taxes. And they never get to take advantage of the social safety net that other Americans get to take advantage of.
We just
say that they're just coming in here and they're losing say lie.
Clay, I thought this was my answer, but it always turns into Anna's answer, doesn't it? A state of California, when you say they don't get to take advantage of it, excuse me, $100 million a year we're now allocating to legal immigrant health care. When you're right, we do have 50,000.
In the state of California.
In the state of California, we have 50,000 homeless people in LA County, and we're diverting $100 million to cover illegal immigrant health care. A problem. But when we're talking about the border, and when Washington bureaucrats and think tanks sit there and say, a wall is not going to help it, and then the people that work on the border say, no, I work on the border. If we had a physical barrier here, it would allow us to
she just gave you the wall, though. She said
it was a waste of money. She said we're diverting resources. It's a giant waste of money.
But that's the point that I was making. She just said, fine, build the wall. It's a waste of money. But build the wall. If you really think that that's the case, build the wall. So let's just for a second pretend we're building the wall. Let's build it. You got your wall. You got your wall. You got your wall. So you've got your wall, and it's cost billions of dollars. And now, what's that going to do to the economy? So let's switch a little bit. I mean, it's hard to transition up here on this stage because y'all could go at it for a while. Remember that thing I said about it being nice and sweet and everybody getting along? That was bullshit. Okay. They get along beautifully backstage, truly. Let's talk about the economy. Let me ask you first. The unemployment rate is the lowest it's been in quite a while. The general consensus, well, I can't say the general consensus, but polling numbers amongst Americans indicate that more believe that they're doing better now than they have in recent decades. Does this not help President Trump's argument that he has done a good job with the economy? I mean, I would imagine that there will be many who would say, well, he's reaping the benefits of President Obama's economy, but I doubt you'd say that, and I think regardless of what you believe, who's to credit for it, President Trump will probably get the credit for that. So is President Trump not responsible, or at least the Republicans in Congress and the House not responsible, for an improvement in the stock market, an improvement in the unemployment rate?
So I'm going to rewind a little bit and talk about Obama and how he improved the economy, right? So there might be some people on the left who don't like what I say here, but it's the truth. Obama did improve the economy for those at the top. And that improvement has continued for those at the top. And let me be specific. I think that the Trump administration took a problem and unfortunately made it worse. So the tax cuts for the wealthy, that's $2 trillion in tax cuts for the very top over the next 10 years. And that is going to defund things that this country needs so desperately, including improvements to our infrastructure, including, social safety net programs that us Americans, we've paid into. People like to say that it's nothing more than a handout. I don't know. I look at my taxes. I see how much of it goes toward those programs that I should be able to take advantage of at some point in the future. But nonetheless, look, if you look at statistics that actually matter, so yes, the unemployment rate is low. What is the quality of those jobs? What do they pay? Do they pay a living wage? Are they full-time jobs? Oftentimes, they're either temporary construction jobs or they don't pay good living wages. And so if you look at consumer debt today is higher than it was at the height of the last economic collapse. We're all going into more and more debt just to be able to provide for our families and to go to school. So there are other measures of the economy that I think, unfortunately, are being ignored. They were ignored in the Obama administration. They're certainly being ignored now. And we need to find ways to improve the economy for the working class, for the middle class, for individuals who actually put their sweat and their blood into making these companies successful.
So I'll agree with you in part on Obama's economy not being as great as the Democrats like to romanticize about it. But at the end of the day, the American people are doing well under this president. The unemployment rate is down, workforce participation is up, median household incomes is also up. It's gone up about $5,000. And that is crumbs to Nancy Pelosi, but it's not to average Americans. Under the Bush years, it was up $400. Under the Obama years, it was up $1,000. So being that it's up $5,000 under President Trump, it is an improvement for families, and that's raising wages. So when the Democrats and you say, no, people are actually struggling, they actually are not. The incomes actually are going up. Is it as much as people want to see? Nobody's ever seeing their income go as much as they would like to have it see. But under this president, it is going up. So that, and I know you want to interrupt me, but I'm going to get to finish because you got to go on like a 3-minute diatribe there. So yes, the unemployment rate is down, workforce participation is up. We also have a president that is addressing a trade issue right now that both sides are wary about, but he's actually stepping up to address it, which many have put off because it's not politically usually favorable to address the trade war, to engage in a trade war, to do what's necessary to get nations like China to play fair, or at least meet us in the middle, have somewhat of a level playing field. This president is doing this, he's addressing these head on. And for the Democrats, when I see them on the stage to say everyone's doing horribly under this economy, it's just not true. As Clay mentioned, the American people are doing well under this economy, which is pretty great for a president. They said that they would collapse us into another recession. That has not been the case. I know much of the Democrats' dismay who are cheering for a recession because they love to beat Donald Trump, but the economy is doing well under this president.
What exactly is it?
Wait, can I please answer that or respond to that? I apologize. So, one of the things that I'm concerned about, and this is genuine concern, one measure that individuals look at in order to gauge our economic success is the stock market. And one of the things that people don't realize is that these stock prices are a house of cards, because after Trump gave these massive tax cuts to the wealthy, to these corporations, I mean, the corporate tax rate used to be 35%. He lowered it to 21%, but when you consider the effective corporate tax rate, it's much lower. That's why companies like Amazon, the most profitable corporation in America, got away with paying 0 in taxes last year. So what do they do with the money that they save from those tax cuts? Do they create jobs? Well, you would think, yeah, right? That's what we keep hearing Republicans say. But in reality, they bought shares of their own stocks, corporate stock buybacks. And so those stock prices are not based on consumers stimulating the economy. They're based on corporate CEOs and executives buying shares of their own stock and artificially inflating the value. It's based on a house of cards, and we should be worried about that.
Are you able to rebut the argument that the tax cuts that were passed by President Trump and the Republican Senate and House were effective in improving the lives of the middle class?
It was a tax cut for 80% of Americans, so yes. And I know that that's something the Democrats don't like to talk about.
But tax cuts help us. Tax cuts put people back.
Let's be
We've done really well without booing so far, so let's not start that crap.
People boo a tax cut, it's amazing.
But
you're welcome to pay more.
Well, let me ask you about that.
You're welcome to.
Well, let me ask you
No
about
one's
that.
making you send that check. You can send it yourself. You can donate your entire income to the
Listen,
government.
if you start heckling them, I'm going to let them heckle you back, so don't heckle them. The tax cuts, I guess, I'm showing my stripes here, but I hear a lot of people talk about make America great again, and there's an argument that we don't build as much as we did, our roads are not as good as they used to be, etc. But if you look back at periods in our country's history when we were investing in infrastructure and we were investing in what some might call social handouts, but others might call social safety nets, which we all appreciate, like Social Security, Medicare. We had tax rates that were far, far higher. Is there a danger that the continual expectation that taxes must continue to get lower and lower and lower will put us in a position as a country where we aren't able to pay for even the most basic things like fixing potholes on interstates?
Well, this president is also, and has been very vocal about fixing our infrastructure. I think that that's a bipartisan effort. He has.
Well, he's been vocal about it, but I don't know that he's done it.
Look, when we're talking about things, I mean, USMCA, that's an easy thing that should be bipartisan, and that's being stalled because of the Democrats. So if we want to go back and forth, Trump's not doing this, not doing that, it's not getting a lot of help. He has brought up infrastructure, that's been a discussion that was had, and then we went into the whole immigration and the shutdown, and then that all got delayed, and now we are in another witch hunt, so everything's being delayed.
Listen, and I don't want anybody to respond to what I'm about to say, because I'm not saying this for an applause or anything, but I will make the point that I've noticed that there's a lot of Democrats' fault that comes from this side, and I don't hear as much blame coming from this side of the room. And so I wonder if it's possible to talk about what the Republican Party. I said I don't want you to respond. Trust me, it's not. I'm not coming, but I'm just asking constructively. Is there a way to make the arguments for what's good in the president's policy without blaming it always on the Democrats doing something?
It would be nice if we could go through a day without them blaming Trump for everything.
I'm not going to disagree with that.
So, I mean, when we're talking about, I think that, the Democrats get unfair scrutiny, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to call bullshit on that because our president can't go.
I'm talking about this stage right
here.
now.
Okay. Look, will say, I'm not saying everything's a Democrat's fault. I'm saying there are areas of bipartisanship that we can work together on. I think infrastructure is one of them. I think USMCA is another one. There are areas of bipartisanship. When you're talking about the stock market, I don't fully disagree with you on that. I understand that that's a house of cards. I also understand that Medicare and Social Security is a house of cards. There are a lot of things that need to be addressed, and it's not going to be one really smart Republican or one really smart Democrat that's going to do it. It's going to be consensus, and I think that that's maybe where we can take our tone down and decide we have a Congress that's not acting in the interest of the American people on both sides.
Why are we not able to work on these things that we all say we agree on, like infrastructure? What do you think is and I'll come to you for an answer on that too. But what do you think is the reason that's not possible?
Well, I mean, that is tough to answer, and we live in a very polarized climate, and I think it's driven by the type of rhetoric that we're hearing in the executive branch, to be quite honest. But I will say one thing. You know, Trump had an opportunity to get things done without having to worry about bipartisanship in the first 2 years of his presidency. And
that's on Republicans.
Why didn't he build the wall then?
And that's what we ask the rhinos every single day. I press them on every single day. Trust me. Trust me. I'm with you on that one. If we can agree on something, is that I'm not happy with a lot of the establishment.
So then maybe it's not just Democrats' fault right now still.
No, it's absolutely not. There's a lot of Republicans who are going to have hell to pay. I've never been someone who's just been a cheerleader.
The sky is going to open up. We agreed on something up here on the stage.
I've never been a cheerleader for the establishment Republicans.
What is an establishment Republican? What does that mean? Because the Democrats say it too. Establishment Democrats, especially when we're in this primary, establishment Republicans. It just sounds to me, as if I'm trying to be nonpartisan, it just sounds to me like Republicans don't like anyone who's not far enough right for them, and Democrats don't like anyone who's not far enough left for them. So what does establishment mean?
I want to change the framing of that question a little bit, because I don't think it's about, oh, we don't support someone who's not left enough or right enough. I think that it's all about rejecting corporatism, right? So, and corruption, really. Because we want lawmakers who actually are good faith actors and are driven by their ideology, driven by their principles and their values. On both the left and the right, our entire system's been hijacked by corporate interests, by legalized bribery, and so none of these lawmakers really represent us unless they reject that money. And honestly, it's very rare to find anyone who's willing to reject it. That's why someone like Bernie Sanders was able to start a movement. Because he said, no corporate PAC money, no big donors, I'm only going to accept small dollar donations, and he's been so principled. You go back 20 years, and he's been preaching the same thing. He believes in what he says, and that's why he's so appealing.
Do you think that's the same definition on the Republican
No, I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree with that. I think that it's the populist movement on both sides, although it's different. That's why you see the rise of Bernie Sanders. That's why you saw the rise of Donald Trump. And I do think that that's more in the people's interest. We have different ways of going about it, but it is that core populist movement. And that's when we both say we're not happy with the establishment. It's because they do put their own interests, their own after-office interests, their own current office interests, the dollar signs, ahead of the American people. And that's a frustration on both sides. Maybe we can agree on that.
Well, who would be establishment characters in your mind? You don't even have,
our good friend Pierre Delecto is one.
Mitt Romney, okay. Sorry.
Of course, I'm not a fan many times of Lindsey Graham. I've been very vocal in my opposition to Lindsey Graham. I'm not fully supportive of Mitch McConnell. I mean, there are several, and there are leaders in the Republican Party that I don't feel like support this president, but more than that, I don't feel like necessarily support the hardworking conservatives in this country that elected them. And I'm sure she has the same on her side of the aisle.
Oh, definitely. I mean, one of the things that Hillary Clinton got a lot of criticism for on the left was her ties to corporate interests. And I think that, for establishment politicians who are paying attention and actually care about these types of discussions, they need to understand that people are paying attention. People are looking into what influences their campaigns and why they push for the types of policies they push for. And if there's a lot of corporate influence, it's very unlikely that these politicians are going to look out for the best interests for the average American, or of the average American.
What do you think the biggest threat for young people in this country is right now?
Socialism.
Yeah, I do.
Do you feel like socialism, define that for me though.
That socialism is taking hold? Yes, I
absolutely. Define what you mean by socialism what define socialism? Because I think we get here thrown around a lot, but there are, I think, maybe I'm wrong, I think there are differing opinions on exactly what people are talking about. Socialism in Venezuela is different than socialism in Bolivia, is different than what some people might call socialism in Norway and Sweden. They all have aspects of it. Canada even does too, but what is the socialism that you're most afraid of?
So, well, when you hear Bernie Sanders, which you know many of you are a fan of, but when you hear him on stage saying the government's going to give you a job, the government's going to give you free healthcare, the government's going to give you free college, you work for the government, you live by the government,
Do you not think that's a little hyperbole, though? I mean,
No,
has he said the government's going to give you a job?
No, federal jobs program, he absolutely did.
But
he absolutely did.
It's about making things
Kind of like the
available.
New Deal, you know?
Is it not about making things available to people? Is it not about making college available and accessible to people versus handing everyone an opportunity, handing everyone college tuition?
You live in the United States of America, you've been handed an opportunity that most people don't have, first and foremost.
I don't disagree with that, but I was handed and I'm not really, I'm trying to disappear, but I'm not, very tough for me. But I was handed an elementary school education for free and a middle school and a high school education for free. Why am I not entitled to college education for free? What makes that socialism, but free high school education is not socialism?
Who made that decision in this country that was we were going up until high school? And if you want to talk about
But could we not make the decision that we're going through college?
who's going to pay for it?
College used to be free in
People pay for high
America.
school.
Public colleges used to be free in America. They were properly funded and they were free. I'm talking about public colleges. They used to be free in America. All the things that Bernie Sanders is campaigning on are things that Americans used to have, but they were taken away from us just to give the top 1% the giant tax cuts that they're enjoying today. So it's not like what he's proposing is radical. What he's proposing are policies that used to make America great, policies that gave Americans opportunities to lift themselves up by the bootstraps and actually create the type of lives that they deserve if they work hard enough for it. The type of lives that my family was able to accomplish, through all the hard work, the sweat, the tears. I mean, I could never do what my parents did today because they had certain opportunities that we just don't have anymore. Free education, I'm talking about college education, is like a fantasy now, and it's not a radical idea considering the fact that we used to have it.
I want to give you an opportunity to expand on it, because I asked you what the fear was, you said socialism, and then I jumped in. So is it that do you fear dictatorship, like we see in Venezuela? What about socialism is it that you feel is the most imminent threat?
Big government, to me, is the biggest threat. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. You can either be free, or you can be dependent on the government. When the people talk about being socialist Democrats or democratic socialists, that's a really nice way to package it, but you can't, the two terms are an oxymoron. If you're dependent on the government for everything, you are not truly free. You cannot live in a democracy where you are then dependent upon the government for all of your worldly desires, needs. Now, the federal job program that Bernie was pushing on the stage, your health care, your college, when you're dependent on the government for all those things, then you're going to just tax the wealthy. I'm tell you this, the thing about the wealthy is they can move, and they're not going to stay there under plans
They
like
should move then, but they don't.
They will.
They don't. They do the tax shelters, but they never move.
But what do you think is going to happen?
Especially the old companies, where are they going to go?
Well, right now, what we're seeing happening in California is a microcosm of what's going to happen in the rest of this country if we allow big government to take over. You're seeing companies leave California for that reason. You're seeing people leave California for that reason. Overtaxed, overregulated, government is too big. That's why they're taking Toyota to Texas. That's why they're fleeing.
So I want to give you an example of big government. I want to get your thoughts on it, because this is something the government does. And when I say government, it means all of us as US taxpayers, right? So we fund the research and development for all these massive corporations. Our tax dollars fund the research and development of pharmaceutical drugs. Then those companies, of course, turn around and they price gouge us, right? We help fund the research and development for massive corporations like Google, right? So big government, I know it sounds real scary, but we're the government. We as US taxpayers, we're the ones who create these successful corporations. And all I'm saying is that we deserve something in return. And unfortunately, we've gotten the complete opposite. And I'm just tired of these talking points because, look, I think big government is a problem when they're telling me what I can do with my body. I think big government is a problem when they tell us who we can and can't marry, or what type of sex we're allowed to have, which was actually a thing back in the day. That's big government. But when it comes to social services that we've paid into, we deserve to get something back.
But how's that working out? How are those things we've paid into working out?
Well, they're severely underfunded just so we can give the wealthy massive tax cuts.
Is if your solution to everything, and I don't know if it's yours, but it certainly is Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, their solution to everything is tax the wealthy, tax the wealthy. If those wealthy folks leave, or they do put their money elsewhere, in whatever creative way you can fantasize about in your mind, and we don't have that money, then who pays for all these social programs? Who is going to get pinched? Well, I can give you the answer because we live in California. We know it's the middle class that gets pinched. In California, you've got the very, very wealthy that can afford it, and you've got the homeless. And then you've got the middle who are fleeing to the Inland Empire. They're fleeing to Phoenix. They're fleeing to Dallas, Texas. They're fleeing because they can't afford it. They can't.
Right. Well, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in California, and I don't know if this one debate gives us enough time to cover it, but there is severe corruption in California. There's an issue with foreign investment in real estate in California, which artificially inflates the property values and leads to homelessness in California. You have real estate developers who are running amok, and that's part of the corruption. I mean, we unfortunately don't have time to get into all of that, but the idea that wealthy people are going to flee, that these corporations are going to flee, I mean, we still subsidize oil companies to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars every year. Where are they going to go? The oil is here. You know, like that's an example. One other example is the top marginal tax rate in the United States used to be 91%. They didn't leave. Okay, so if you want to leave, have at it. But I think that if you're living in this country and you've taken advantage of the opportunities that this country has given you, you're not allowed to shut the door behind you. And I'm not talking about equality of outcome, I'm talking about equality of opportunity. We should have a system that's fair, that gives people their opportunity to shine and work themselves up the economic ladder.
And
that's all.
And we agree on that statement. We don't agree how to get there. I believe innovation is fostered through competition, through the free marketplace.
And taxpayer money, through research and development.
But you realize that the government's also funding research and development for all of your alternative fuel companies, for all the research. I mean, it's not just, they're not just fueling corporate. I mean, to say that our government, our taxpayer dollars are funding corporations and then to not look at all the other areas that they're funding, is government spending a problem? Absolutely.
I would imagine that if someone developed an alternative energy, historically speaking, the government would let a company take it over and profit from it, correct?
Not in Bernie Sanders' America, not in Elizabeth Warren's America. Innovation is fostered through the free marketplace and competition. It is not fostered through handouts, through socialism, through government regulation. And that's why we're seeing the economy doing well now, because President Trump has gotten rid of a lot of the Obama-era regulations that were crushing small business. That is still the backbone of our nation. And when small businesses can't function, then they can't hire, and then they can't have high-paying jobs. When they're given all these government mandates of $15 an hour minimum wage, then they can't hire as many employees. So yes, those employees that they have might be making what they consider a living wage, but then the other person just doesn't have a job. So then they rely on the social program. That's not a way to live.
I agree with you in that small businesses would have a difficult time paying $15 an hour to their employees, which is why I think it makes all the sense in the world to stop subsidizing corporations that are already very successful and subsidize small businesses so they can pay a living wage and also grow themselves.
So it was interesting to me when you rebutted what I said a second ago. You said, well, it would in Bernie Sanders' America and it would in Elizabeth Warren's America. And my initial reaction was to say, well, that actually makes the argument for Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren because, well, to certain people, what I said and what you said would happen in their words. That's what a certain part of this audience wants. The people who support Bernie Sanders, the people who support Elizabeth Warren, they think that's great. To people who agree with you more, they think that's horrible. So how do we, it seems like on both sides, we're handing out facts on this side and facts on this side and talking points on this side and on this side that are really continuing to speak to our audience, and we're not doing too much to change anybody's mind. If you came here supportive of Ana, you probably are going to leave supportive of Ana, and if you came here supportive of Tomi, you're going to leave supportive of Tomi. What do you, and listen, and that's great, whoever you came here for, but what do you find is most effective for you when you need to change somebody's mind?
when I go into conversations like this, I don't have any delusions of changing Anna's mind or yours or anybody else's. I think it's about having a conversation in this country about our values, and they are different. And it's okay to have conversations about differing values because that's why we have the two parties that we have in the various political ideologies that we have. We have conservatism, we have liberalism, we have progressivism, we have Republicans, Democrats, we have everybody in the middle, libertarians, all of that, to have a discussion. Sometimes there's not a solution that both sides can agree to. That's why we have Congress that can hopefully get somewhere in that middle. Right now, that's not happening.
Doesn't that make people mad? It seems like to me, people get more mad if you find a solution somewhere in the middle than if you choose something. I mean, listen, I think a lot of people have made the argument that one of the reasons President Trump has doubled down on his base and only his base is because he made a calculation with Steve Bannon that it doesn't matter whether I compromise or whether I moderate, I'm never going to win the people on the left. So what's the point in moderating or compromising?
But he did win people on the left. He won states that he wouldn't otherwise have.
Well, he won states that he otherwise wouldn't have had. But
well,
he
those are people in those states
okay,
that
well,
voted for
we
Trump.
can disagree about the fact that the numbers are certainly not in his favor right now, polling-wise. I'm just saying.
Come see me in 2020, Clay. I'm interested
Girl, I
to
will
have
be
that
right here with
conversation.
you. I'll plan on it. But you understand what I'm saying. We're still playing to our ends. And I think what you said is wonderful. We do have differing opinions. But if we keep shouting in the end zones and nobody's... So what about you? I mean, how do you... Because I have to assume that, yes, we say what we want to say because we are proud of what we believe, but we do have to at least sway some people to not only see it our way, but to understand that maybe your way is right, or your way is right. What works for you?
Well, for me, I think it's important to focus on the one thing that really does unite all Americans, regardless of their ideology. And for me, that's the economic situation. Whether you're on the left or the right, the decisions that our lawmakers make in regard to how we're taxed, what our wages are, that affects all of us. And I think that there is a lot of frustration. I mean, I feel it myself when it comes to the unfair system that we have in place right now. The system is really rigged against the worker. Right? There's much more focus on, the tax cuts, the protectionism for those at the very top. And so for me, look, this isn't about like, oh, I want to demonize those on the right. This is about, hey, how do we find solutions so Americans can prosper? And this whole thing about education, I just want everyone to understand that it's not about giving people handouts. It's about making this country stronger. If you want innovation, the best way to do it is give people access to education. And when I use the word access, I'm not talking about the way corporate Democrats use access in regard to healthcare. I mean genuinely giving people free public college. So if they have some intellectual curiosity, if they have a passion, they can actually move forward and pursue that. And unfortunately, all those opportunities have been shut down. I want to have a discussion about how we can open those opportunities up again and create a stronger country.
Do you ever get scared when you share your opinion? Do you ever get physically afraid? Are you worried? I mean, are you worried? Tell me about that. As you're talking about politics, it's so polarizing. People say some nasty things. Does it worry you?
To be honest, I'm more concerned about my family than I am about myself. The threats are very specific. The doxing is terrifying. And, if something happens to me, that would be terrible. But if something happened to members of my family, it would be far worse. And so, my nieces and my nephews are my life. And I want to share them with my fans. And I want to share pictures and celebrate their birthdays publicly. And I can't do that out of fear that someone's actually going to carry out an act of violence and hurt them. So yeah, the fear is real. And I think that this political climate has made me extremely paranoid, and I wish I weren't that way.
Do you get scared? I mean, I know you got your gun, girl, so I'm worried about you there. But do you not get worried? You're very polarizing, of course, and you speak very strongly about your opinions. Do you get worried at all?
Well, I've had things actually happen to me, so it's not a worry, it's actually a reality for me. But yes, at the end of the day, it is, but I would feel horribly if I sat on a stage next to someone like you and you, but watched on TV. I won't say how old I was. But to say that, I'm a victim, yes, sometimes I have been a victim, but I get to do, in my opinion, the greatest job I could have ever hoped to have. So yes, I get flack, I get backlash. My family, I've been doxxed, my family's been doxxed, I've had death threats, I've had things thrown at me. but I still sit here and feel incredibly blessed that I get to do this, because there are so many people who don't get to do what we get to do and live their dreams like we get to live them. So I will take all of those bumps and bruises, I will take the heckling, I will take the name calling, because quite frankly, I'm very blessed that I just get to do this in general.
And I think both, I'm not going to speak for both of you, I'll let you do it yourself, but I think both of you and most of the people who you work with and that you work with recognize that the folks who are doing what you're doing are doing it because you have a passion for this country, and you have a passion for this country, and you have wildly divergent views, but both still want for America the best, for America to be the best that she can be. And I imagine that those of you who are here today because you also want the best for the country and for it to be the best that it can be. And despite the fact that some of you may cheer more loudly for Ana and some of you may cheer more loudly for Tomi, I do believe that, I know that both of these ladies know, and I hope everyone out here knows, that they are friends backstage, you know, and that we all should be as well. So, I mean, if you want to speak to that, both of you, we're out of time now, but I'll let you both have the last word.
Just one line, and it's a line from Bernie Sanders' campaign. I'm willing to fight for someone I don't know.
No, I think just to speak to conversations that we can have, I've done this several times now. I had a great conversation a couple of years ago, for those of you who were there, with Chelsea Handler. Disagree on a lot of things, had a great conversation. You and I have had offstage conversations that were great. We get heated, we yell at each other, but at the end of the day, I don't walk off stage hating you. I don't walk off stage with bad feelings, bad blood. I don't wish any ill upon you, and I wish we could get to a place in this country where we could genuinely feel that way and have our political disagreements, sometimes even yell, get very heated, but still can walk off stage and say, I still would tell anybody that asked me, if they said, oh, that Ana girl, she's a bitch, I would say, no, we can have a good conversation backstage, and I'm not going to diminish her or name call her. We disagree passionately, but we can be civil, and I think we should all be able to do that. That would be nice if we could get to that place, wouldn't it?
I, on the other hand, am a very huge bitch. Ana Kasparian, Tomi Lahren, ladies and gentlemen.